Good afternoon. How are you doing? Welcome to the KieLive number 10. How are you, Alex?
I'm great, Karina. How about you?
I'm very excited for today's talk because I'm an enthusiast of BPM and BPMN and everything around process automation. So I'm pretty excited for what we are having today. What about you? Do you like it? Are you like fond of process automation in general?
Well, I've been doing this for the last 10 years, so I'm completely biased if I like or not. It would be really hard to say that I don't, but I think I have some opinions that about things, and we'll have some comments during the Lazarotti, our guest, and we can exchange some ideas there.
And I think the cool thing is that the guest today, he's been involved with with management of internal teams, but he's seen how support works, how engineering works. He also has MBA in business process itself. So I think it's better if we invite him to introduce himself. What do you think, Alex?
Absolutely. Come and join us, Alessandro.
Welcome, Laza.
Hey,
Thank you.
hello everyone.
It's pretty good
Thanks
to
for
have you
inviting me.
here.
Yeah, it's I'm very happy to be here with you
Laza,
guys.
tell us a little bit about your background on BPM so that we understand what is the base you will have during the talk today.
Okay, so yeah, uh, well, I'm working with the jBPM team and Kogito and Red Hat Process Automation Manager for a while. I'm a Red Hat employee since 2008. But even before joining Red Hat, I also been involved with process industry in general, right? I think that's my first work related to process itself, not just process, but also with roles started in 2004, 2005, right? And I've been working with this since so, right? It's of course not just about as you mentioned, Karina, not just about management, but I also been helping with development and consultant before. So I'm glad to be here also now representing Red Hat. So
It's pretty exciting, yeah. So you've seen this in action from many different perspectives. So that's why I think this is going to be an exciting topic today.
Yeah, and I think also very interesting get Alessandro perspective. It's he has been around with so many waves around business process automation that will give us a very interesting perspective, like what these all the waves that we've been surfing, like SOA or things like that, and now micro. The landscape is so different, but there's so much like similarities.
Yeah, so I'd like to send a hi for who's watching us live right now. Amit, Kalyani, Ravi, Kirill. The good thing of having you live right here, right now, is because you feel free to send your questions, your comments, and we will bring it live so we can discuss about it and ask our guest opinion. So feel free to share any thoughts you have during the whole live session, and we'll be glad to bring it. So, Alex, is there anything you want to add before we ask our guest to share his screen?
Absolutely not. I'm eager to listen to what Alessandro will share with us today.
So, Laza, feel free to share your screen. And we didn't even test it before.
yeah,
that's live.
It's more exciting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go there.
And me and Alex will be on the backstage and we'll be interacting with you via chat. And we'll be here, Laza, if you need anything, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so people can already see your screen and we'll be on the backstage.
Okay, so thank you very much. Well, again, thanks for inviting me for this KieLive. I would like to talk about business process. The title of this presentation is Introduction to Business Process Core Concepts, but in the fact, I would like to deconstruct some concepts. I think that in order to understand better business process, we need to really to put some bias that we may have inside and take a look closer to what the concepts really means. For that, we would like to talk about this quote from William Edward Deming. For those who does not know who Deming was, he was the most important statistician from the last century. He helped the Japanese companies after Second Wars to rebuild their business based on the continuous improvement techniques, focusing, reducing the rework, and increasing the quality of their products, right? So Deming said, if you can't describe what you are doing as a process, you don't know what you are doing. And he is totally right. Process surround us about everything that you do. So even the fact that you wake up, you drink your coffee, you go to work, this is a kind of process, right? According with the Oxford Dictionary, so a process is a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. So most of the things we can express in some process way. While the business, it's about the practice of making one living by engaging in commerce. So everything that you negotiate, commercialize, everything that you make profit is what we call business. So that said, we can say that business process is maybe the step of activities that make you earn some profit. Yes, it is, but usually there is a more straightforward concept about business process. When we talk about business process, most of the time we will be talking about when you have inputs, that let's say raw materials, and you have a transformation of those raw materials, and you have outputs like books or any other kind of manufactured product, okay? Of course, that it's not just about manufacturing industry. You may have as example, services as input, a requirement for a such customer demand. You have a transformation of that request to be a project, and you have as output the service being delivered. Or you may have an online shopping cart where user will add some virtual items to it, and the transformation will be these items be delivered, the concrete products being delivered in a user house, right? So this is usually what we call business process, but they are not the only kind of business process. It's what we call core business process or primary process. In the industry, there are other types of business process as well. As I said, the core process, they are the primary process in a company. It expresses what the company stands for, the business of the company. As example, in a car repair shop, probably the car repair process is one of the most important thing that they have there, so it's part of the core process. In a healthcare, the tenancy is a crucial service that they have. In assurance, the services itself, or in a metallurgy, the manufacturing process, and of course, in a software factory, the process of software development is a core process. One thing about core process is, after each step, it adds some value to the end customer, right? So this is a premise for core process. As other kinds of process, we have the management process. It's the one where the strategic plan is defined in a company, and also the way that you measure the success of that plan, right? So that is created the KPIs, etc. So it's another kind of process. And we have the support process. Support process, it's really support the core process and management process, but without adding value after each step to the final customers. That is what makes the more difference between support process, also called secondary process, and core process, the primary process. So the support process, they are commodities. And usually they are used, as example here, I've mentioned human resources, facilities, capacity management, and others. Even though they are commodity process, usually it takes 70% of the overall process that you have in your company, right? So usually it's handled by some ERP software, or they are outsourced, right? But see that the core process and the management process is really what makes your company different from another company. And you may think that maybe the management process is the most important here, right? Because it's the strategic one. But actually, it's not, because we're not talking about the plan itself. We're talking about the process to make the plan. So maybe you have a very good process, but a very bad plan. So the most important here is the core process, right? So I'm talking again about the core process because it is really what makes the difference one company to another company. If you have a bad core process, you have a very bad product or a very bad service delivery. Okay. Well, that said, it's we're talking about a different kind of process, and so is this what people call business process management? So this is what BPM is about? Not really. So those are just business process, okay? And see, the same way that I've mentioned about a routine that you can express in a process, remember in my first slides, it's the same thing about business process. Sometimes you may have a business process there that's not mapped, so it's just happen. Companies produce products without necessarily have the well followed by diagrams or documented or people being aware of the end-to-end process. It's just there. Business process management is different. It's really about a discipline over the business process that you have. There are different definitions for business process management. I really like this one for bpm.com. Right? It's about business process management is a discipline involving any combination of modeling, automation, execution, control, measurement, and optimization of business activity flows. Right? So, and yeah, so it's a discipline. It's not a software. BPM is not a software. It's not an architecture. It's a discipline. And in the same way that project has a PMO, right, and a PMBOK, we have the same thing for process. So for process, we have what we call CBOK, the common body of knowledge. The current version for BPM CBOK is the 4.0. It was released last year, December last year. And it tries to put the discipline in some phases. So instead of you have some chaotic process going on, we really try to map it with the company strategy alignment until the end to the customer, right? And these phases are very important in a BPM discipline. I will try to summarize here a little bit about this phase just to really understand what BPM is about. So the first phase of a BPM, it's about aligned to strategy goals. I've mentioned about management, right? About management process. The first phase is really about trying to see where the company would like to be in the next 6 months, 1 year, or 5 years, right? So you define the goals, you define how you track if you are able to achieve that goals in that period of time or not. So that should be well defined during the first phase. The second phase is to see if you can achieve what the company is proposing. You need to see where you are. So during the second phase is where what we call mapping the process that you have as is. That means we'll try to do some interviews with the actors of the process, with the participants of the process, to try to understand how the process really is executed, try to understand the current metrics that you have for that process, if that metrics align with the new strategy for the company or not. If you need to have what changes is required to have actually in that process. So that is what we call process to be. So you need to map using some toolings, as I said, brainstorming, interviews, prioritization of problems of the current process. And so you start thinking about, okay, so I have this, where I'm going to. So we start sketching how the process should be, right? The third phase is about, now I know where I do like to go. I know the process more or less that I need to change. And I need to see if it's required some trainings, is trainings needed or not. I need to buy different softwares that I don't have yet that may support me on that. I need to have a different reorganization in the company. And the fourth phase is the go live. So you get the new process that you have, you get the trainings done, and you put all of these in place. And we start to see the drivers for the new project deployed in this phase. Right, so we start trying to see if it's moving on, if how you are going to progress. And for the first, the phase 5, you see if the KPI is defined in the phase 1. So no longer the drivers during the deployment phase, but if really the KPI is defined for the first phase, they are achievable now with all of these in place. And sure, try to see if this customer satisfaction is really increased by the new strategy. That said, the phase 6 is actually the phase 1, right? So we try to see, okay, this is aligned with my business. That makes sense, the difference that I did with the new process, with the new organization as well. And this is done by design. So BPM is a cycle by design. I've mentioned Deming, right? So you call that I've mentioned Deming in my first slide. So he was the promoter of the plan, do, check, and act, the PDCA cycle, the continuous improvement cycle. That is where during the 50s, Toyota raised in the industry as the most important car building factory, right? And based on this kind of discipline there, what we call now Toyota Way or total quality management. And not just Toyota, but also Nissan and the other Japanese companies. When Deming returned to US during the 80s, Ford adopted the same methodology. And by the end of 8 and during the 90s, General Electric and Motorola expanded the PDCA cycle to a more refined way, what we call now DMAIC or Six Sigma, that is used today also for continuous improvement in the process. And this exploded in the current discipline for BPM. So in BPM, talking more about the business process itself, so the phases we can summarize about designing, about modeling the execution, executing it, monitoring, and optimizing the process. Okay, but that's not just about that. One important thing about BPM that more than just about reviewing the process is to review the organization itself. And this is why BPM as a management discipline is something that have been now that we talk about digital transformation, so rethinking the business is something very hot. Usually the organizations are split in functional departments, right? Functional silos. But the thing is, business process don't care about that. They are cross organization. They touch different departments on it. And we may have some problems due to that, right? So how you can handle the handoff between a task from one department to another department, as maybe individuals manager has different targets, different goals. So who is the responsible for the process? This is why today we discussed a lot about horizontal management. So instead of you have a hierarchy, and that usually is done by the companies, we have that laid down in a more horizontal way. As this is very hard to achieve, we have a mix today. So this slide represents that. So you have the functional organization and business process crossing it with something on top. This is on top of this is what we call the BPM Offices or BPM Center of Excellency. They are the process owners. They are the responsible to make sure the process is moving forward. And we have for that new roles in the companies for that. And see, BPMO is the same thing for the project that we have the PMO. So it's exactly the same discipline for process. Well, as part of the BPMO, we have there the practitioners, as I said. So we have there the process manager, that is the real owner for the end-to-end process, the analyst to see how it is progressing, what's need to be changed, the designer that who will map the process, right? And the architects responsible to put this in production, to do the rollouts, to see if this is executable or not. So this is sometimes a mix of engineering and analysts and so. Well, that said, so see that the practitioner, they works for different departments, cross departments. And so across different languages, different domains, right? So how they can have this language aligned? Well, by diagrams, but what kind of diagram? Well, there is no only one diagram actually, right? So it is used yet in some high-level process, what we call SIPOC. It is supplier input, process, outputs, and customers. This brings a really high-level visualization of the process that you have. We had in the past a very used kind of model called EPC. It's a event process chain, I think so. It's a proprietary format, and it's even though it was very used in the past, it's no longer so used. Of course, we have the flowcharts. This is very used even nowadays. The problem about flowcharts is the lack of standards, right? Even though you have a ANSI standard for flowcharts, very high level. So in the end, every company or department has your own way to look at and to write flowcharts. This is why was created the BPMN, Business Process Model and Notation. It was created in 2004, I think so. In the beginning, it was created by the BPMI. Now it's who maintain it is the OMG, Object Management Group, the same group that maintains the UML, right? And it's the fact standard for the business process. So every practitioner know what BPM stands for and what means the symbols. It's with each icon or steps into it means. I would like to highlight just three major things about the notation of BPM process. Well, first, what we call events. So events are literally events that happens in a process. The fact that you are starting a process is a kind of event. Is the event of the process initialization, right? In the termination as well, it's another kind of event. You may have intermediate events, like to send some information to participants, external participants. In this model, this is a model available in our Kogito project. So Kogito is a platform to assist with business automation in general, right? And we have this in our repository examples. So while we reach this send visa application, you will send an event that's something, okay, someone sent application for a visa. And so external participant can actually listen to this kind of event and react to that. In the same way, we may be catching events. So this is why we have these yellow cycles here. It's visa rejected, as example, or visa approved. So there are events that the process will be listened to, and when it happens, it will react to that. We have activities. So activities, they are work that are performed or by a human being or by automated tooling or so, right? We have different specializations for these activities. I will not detail everyone the same way that I've not detailed the events, right? But you may have a user task. Here is in apply for visas example. You may have rule tasks. This is about to execute business rules. Usually, these require some integration with, like jBPM and Kogito has with rules, which is a rule engine. But this can be also done by something automated by code, or even looking at some spreadsheet and so. We have the activities that actually drill down to another process, which is the sub-process or call activities, here represented by book hotel or book flight, right? So it's their subdomain of this domain. And then we have other here representing diagrams like the script task, which is something that will be automated by some scripting language. So see, everything that I said here, actually, it could be well understood when you look at the diagrams. I mean, you can see that something started. You see that you have a visa check. It's a business rules that will check the visa. You see that there is a user responsible to manually check that visa. You will react to some events. There are some automation about sending an email in case it's there is some rejection. And you have other processes that will be executed once they are reached, right? This is, as I said, the thing that make sure that every business engaged with the process is aware about what is happening. That is what the notation of BPMN brings as value. Yeah, sorry. And we have the gate. So the gate size is responsible to split a process in different paths or to join paths. You may have parallel gateways and inclusive gateways. You may have gateways based on events, as we have here as well, for visa detection, right? Yeah, but that's okay. But Alessandro, you have been talking for a while, and all of this is about business users, about business process, it's about companies, but and about IT. So how this help me in IT? I see the value for this about business process. I see that okay, all of this makes all sense now for you've mentioned digital transformations, so maybe to rethink where we are in the strategies for that. But how this will help the IT? Before I talk about IT, we'd like to talk about the book, right? If you are involved with software development and you don't know what domain-driven design stands for, I recommend you buy this book today, right? So this book from Eric Evans, that are captured there from Martin Fowler, is a very interesting one about software design. I would like to hear here to read here a quote from Martin Fowler about that. So he states that domain-driven design is an approach to software development that centers the development on programming in a domain model that has a rich understanding of the process and rules of a domain. Okay, so this is from Martin Fowler. An example about domain-driven design is if you work with software, you know some patterns like data access objects, right? So it's an abstraction layer for you to store some data in a storage or in a persistent layer like databases and so. And when we're talking about domain-driven design, we're trying to align this some terms that you use when you are coding, because literally we get a requirement from the business and we code it, right? So domain-driven design is about decoding what you code, talking about the same language. In that case, instead of using data access object, if you are an application, as example about photos, about pictures, instead of using a data access object, you'll be using a repository of photos. Or you can get still closer with the domain and say, okay, I have a catalog of photos that I will catalog.add a photo on it, right? So this kind of dynamic about adjusting how you write the software is the whole thing about domain-driven design. And you have some immediate benefits from it. So what we call ubiquitous language. So the domain experts and the dev team use exactly the same language that can bring agility to your model, because the analyst itself will contribute directly to your software models, right? And this also helping you to break down sometimes very complex softwares and in a more fine granularity, right? Creating some logical boundaries that eliminate the scope for that portion of software. Now we're talking about microservices example. And microservices uses a lot of the concepts behind domain-driven designs to define bounded context, to define context mappings, to identify aggregates of services itself. And see, this is also leads to reduce some bottlenecks that we have while we're developing softwares, because as we are talking the same language than the experts, the business experts, you deliver exactly just what they are asking to. You're not over-architecting anything. So this leads to a lean code. This leads to a more short cycle of deliverings and the increment of what you are doing in your you can be using different agile, of course, methodologies for that. But anyway, put more fast to production what is needed. And I cannot see actually a better metaphor than BPM2 to bring it together what business analyst is asking about and about software engineering should execute, what they should do. Let's look in again the BPM2 model for the travel agents, right? So we have here the travel agents that I just explained some notations, but let's see the model of that. So see that BPMN does not stand for business process management notation. It's not about business process management. It's about business process itself, right? And even though I talk about notation, so we have also the model execution. So let's see differently. So instead of just looking the events or the sub-process, let's see them as the bounded context. So you see that we have a whole domain about travel agency, and in some portion of the code, you'll be reaching to send an event that you don't know about what the external participant will act. And you don't need to care, because that's not about your domain. You'll be communicating to them, and when you receive something, you will be moving back to your domain. And the same thing about the sub-process, right? So they are a way for you to encapsulate a more complex logic, another domain that you may have, and in this kind of activities. The process itself is a kind of aggregate. It's the another pattern for domain-driven design. As we're talking here in a domain that may have some subdomains that you can aggregate in execution. So it's exactly what the aggregated pattern is about, right? So you can call this process as an example that it's orchestrating the calls to your subdomain, or you may have the choreography over this process to an external context bounded based on events. So I have a demo here, but I think that before, because I'm sharing my whole presentation, so I can see how long I've been taking. Yeah, now I
So
can see it's
you can
30
switch
minutes.
to StreamYard if you want. If you want to take a break before your demo. So we already have people like asking about the link in between domain-driven design. How does this link to business processes? And you could perfectly answer it with that slide where you have the graphics with bounded context and stuff. So yeah, that's a pretty nice relation.
Yeah, and one thing that looking to the diagram where you're explaining like all these boxes, what brought my attention was the events. It's like something that I'll be honest, like everyone says that looks old or like from 2000s. You have embedded something that seems very modern. Like we're talking about the microservice architectures. A lot is about events that are going all directions, event-driven architecture, right? And it seems that it has built in the model that you show us. What, and I think it also connects a little bit with the question that you have.
Yeah, exactly. See that it's business process itself, the model itself. It's even though for people, and probably before the demo, we'd like to finish some slides that I have because I think that this can answer some things about the old and the new about business process and how they can link the things and why seems like, hey, sounds old, isn't it? And why actually it's not. So I will move on with some slides, and so we can do a short
Sure.
demo.
Let me share your screen again.
Okay. Okay, so here we go. It's a kind of provocation that I did here, right? So we talked in the past a lot of service-oriented architecture, right? And SOA or SOA, doesn't matter what we call this, but service-oriented architecture first it was a promise the beginning of this century. It I think into 2000 from 2005 to 2008 or even before that, we have a lot of conversations about this kind of architecture. And still today, people try to say, "Hey, microservices is probably the new service-oriented architecture, isn't it?" The thing is, when we call SOA by that age, we say about the classic SOA. We say about you had the specification expressed by the WSDL, right, about web service. So we had the explosion of web service during early 2000s. And so we said that web service based on HTTP and bringing the SOAP as the protocol was the answer for everything about componentization of software, right? So we can express everything and communicate everything based on web services, even for a high platform like mainframes and the legacy systems that you may have. So I brought to you the enterprise service bus, a backbone that integrate every service into it. It's responsible for any kind of transformation and communication to web services to this platform. And we have even the idea, as this is really old, about canonical models. So instead of you doing as I just expressed it by the domain-driven design, the idea to create some bounded context, very small bounded context, there you can put there, compress there everything about the domain. So we have a very well scoped. And during the SOA ages, it was totally the opposite. Oh no, let's put the canonical models in every place. Legacy system maybe starting adopting and changing to choose canonical models. New system should use canonical models. If you do some change in your system, you should update every other because they should use the same model, right? And during the same period of time, we had a language to try to do the orchestration over those services, which was BPL. Do you recall BPL? So it's the business process execution language. Even though it was called business process, it was not really the notation for any business user, right? It was much more to bring requirements related to business, because to be honest, every software is based on business requirement, right? So it was much more the idea of bringing the requirements and to execute those based on web service orchestration. So it's just about everything is executing as a SOAP web service, and you have the people doing the orchestration. Of course, it was not a good idea, because we have process that may have a different interface, not just with the system, sometimes with the users. People does not cover that. It's not representative as notation for business user as well. So the SOA platform is starting to using BPM, replacing BPO for BPM in that moment. So it was much more something to adapt one school to a different school. SOA is an architectural style of software design. Of course, in the end, as every piece of software, to try to solve a business requirement, but it's much more architectural style. While BPM, it's a discipline, as I said. It's totally a discipline. And BPM, and here we have the different perceptions. While people that is in contact with BPM in the industry is still, okay, BPM is exactly what I need for digital transformation. Is exactly what I need to rethink my business. Because see, different than the old cycles from Deming, from DMIC and Lean Sigma, where the continuous improvement is much more about getting better in your process. BPM is much more about rethinking your process, right? And this is, of course, something very needed still today. And so or not. So we have different architectural style nowadays. So even though that was an old promise, it does not even succeed, right? Or not in that moment, in that format. Well, now we have the microservice things. That is why the SOA, as we knew it, it's dead, but not BPM. BPM now, you have the explosion of new terms related to BPM as software, because yes, we don't like to be associated with maybe something that can sound as outdated for some reason, right? So we have in the industry what we call digital process automation, intelligent BPM suites, business automation, business process automation, services orchestrator, workflow management, intelligent automation, just to IT to understand that, okay, that's not that old BPM. We're talking here about something different. Now we can integrate the systems with IoT. We can integrate it with AI, right? This is about intelligent BPMS. It's about like you can automate some user tasks using some help from AI. So we have different kind of automation. You can orchestrate microservices and have out-of-box toolings for that. So see that the concept about BPM is still there. Is still what the business is looking into. However, the toolings reflect much more the moment in the industry that we are. And that's why we have these different terminologies being used today. And one last thing. See that even though I talked about business process in the concept itself is the real workflow being executed, right? So again, just to reminder, BPM2 is a notation and also a model for execution. BPM is a discipline, it's not a tooling, right? And we have the business process itself, which is the workflow. So even though the business process, maybe it's not mapped, when we have the workflow, you have that mapped. And maybe for some situations, even the business process notation is not, in that case, the best representation to you. So really depends on where you are. As an example, nowadays we're talking about microservices. BPM2 can bring too many benefits from you with the domain-driven design, as I said, approach about communication, solve too many problems. But if you are just a developer, that you don't have any contact with the business, if you don't want actually to have any, if this, I don't know, but for some reason that is not your intent, right? To have this kind of communication with the business. So you can use as example, the new spec being raised there in CNCF about the serverless workflow. We see this is very interesting. Even though we have a different notation, a different representation for that, in our tooling, in our Kogito project, behind scenes, you're executing exactly the same engine. So it's exactly an workflow. So see that does not matter the metaphor that you are using on top. In the end, you are still using a workflow engine. You're still using the same concept that is required by the business to execution, even though the representation is different, right? And this is why it's still very important. It's not outdated, and the business automation platform is still rocking across the world.
Laza, I
Well,
will
so
allow you to do your demo, but I'm pretty much willing to interrupt you and just talk about all this stuff. But please go through your demo first, and then I'll jump in. Okay? I'll hold
okay.
myself.
Okay. Well, actually, yes, this was more a conceptual talk, and as we have been talking before, so it's I don't know if the public is if they are know how to get started with process. So I would like just to share maybe some tools or how actually such box works behind scenes. So okay, I understood, but how I can code over that model, how that works, right? So first thing. We have available one thing called BPM.new, which is the editors, the BPM editor provided by the Kogito team, by business automation team from Red Hat, right? So here we don't have anything more than the editor. And this is interesting because, as I said, the BPMN is a notation for the business analysts. So for the practitioners, they know what that is about. So they do not need to install any software. They can go here just to draw what they want. So I will just do a simple, really hello world to try to see how business user can start here from this platform and how you can import this in an IDE as example and to code over that. Okay, is that fine?
Sure, please go on.
Okay, so we have the initialization of the process there. Let's see that we have two activities, so two tasks and an end activity. So the first business say, hey, we need something to say hello. And say, hey, after we say hello, we need something to say world. Okay? And this is the process. You may have here gateways or different tasks or things that you'll be working with to accomplish the goal for your process. But this is just to represent a basic flow and how that will work as example in an ID. I will use here VS Code. Can you see my VS Code, Karina?
I can see it, but the font is too small. Let's see when you open the diagram if it gets better. Okay, way better now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you can increase it.
Yeah. Okay. So I will use here. So the idea of this presentation is not to explain Kogito or jBPM or Process Automation Manager by Red Hat. So I will use, because it's really simple to start it, the Kogito as a Quarkus extension. Okay. So let's start generating a Quarkus project.
Yeah, the font size, it will help if you increase it a little bit. Thank you. Yes, like this. Thank you.
Okay, so I use the default I will use the default here as well. And that's it, everything. Yes, so I'm just using the defaults for that. And here is where I will use as extension the Kogito ones. So I will use Kogito extension. I will use OpenAPI. So I can see the process by the Swagger provided endpoints. And that's it. So let me select KieLive here, generate here. Okay. Business process. Okay. So here I have my business process project created using Quarkus and Kogito, right? I will import. So resources here I don't have any BPM diagram, so I will import what I just created. And so how we can have the collaboration between the analysts here. So the analysts built it based on the notation that they want, right? And how the collaboration should be done by the others. As I said, in the roles for practitioners, right? So let's say how the architect or actually the development team can take the advantage of that notation and make it executable. So I build it here in the KieLive business process source man resource. And maybe I can check, and it should be there. Let's see if we can open it. Okay. So see exactly the same diagram. You can open it in your VS Code IDE, right? So it's exactly the same thing that the business analysts wrote there into our editor website. Okay, I can define here other things, so some properties, and this is what actually it's done in a real process. Okay, so in a real process, the analysts, they will not code script tasks. They will not code some like process variable and so. This is a collaboration effort between analysts and the team that will execute that. Okay, so I will, just an example, I will make this first task as a script task, right? So I will code here, like, okay, script task, just a system.out, println, and hello, right? And that's it. So let's save this. Oh no, I will also create here to make something different. Let's say that we have a script task. So you, as you can see, you can code anything based on Java, and also supports JavaScript there as script tasks, so the developers can add any code to that space. But in a real world, actually, what you do in this kind of tasks, we will relink it to some service or something that you create into your application that you code over that. So for this one, I will create what we call service task. Okay, so service task is a portion of software executed out of your process. All right, and here for that, I will create a new Java class here. I will call word service.java. And here I will create let's call it say something. Okay. Oops, sorry. And it will say rolled. So for the Kogito, any bean that you have in your application, you can use it in a process. See that for here, you code actually call external service, and so it's really an open space. You may interact with database systems or JMS systems or stream systems, and so this is really some everything you can code inside this kind of tasks. Okay. And to map it here to this service task, everything that we need is, okay, it's a full qualified name for that as the interface. So it was under this package, right? It's world service.java. I don't need to put actually .java here. And the operation is say something, right? So if I did all of this correct, it's all that we need. So I will, let me just.
I'm just like shaking my head over here. Let's see if it's going to work.
I'm here in the backstage. I cannot even breathe.
So let's execute in the Quarkus dev mode. Let's see.
Would this also work on Spring Boot? If there are any Spring Boot users watching the live, could they just execute also this with Kogito on top of Spring Boot, Plaza?
Yeah, exactly. Kogito. Oh yes, of course, something, right? Let's see.
That's live code. Yes, totally.
Yeah. Let's see.
It's the test that is broken. Let's see.
The interface, maybe put there. Let me just check here the correct name that I used. It's Lazarotti word service. Yeah. Maybe I don't know if I save it actually. Oh yeah, I think that it was that. Let me just reopen here and just check the name if that's all correct. I think that the only thing is that I didn't save the class. Yeah, the name is correct.
Exactly.
Yeah. So let's do it again. Yep, I put there Quarks Dev. Yeah. Okay, I think that everything is done. Right? So yeah, the swaggers are available. So just let's try to execute it there. So as I added as extension the Open API, so I can access the Swagger UI for that service, as you can see
But
here.
wait,
And
you
yeah,
didn't even create like any REST endpoint. So how did you get this?
exactly.
Like this? You
So
just have a business process on there.
kudos for Kogito for that. So in Kogito, when you create a BPM process, it's the same thing for GMN. You also have when you compile it, it generates everything that you need as to access that content as a service. So as I said in the past, that as example in the travel agents that I've demonstrated during my slides, how it represented by BPMN2 diagrams. And I've mentioned that it's a kind of aggregate services. Is exactly the same thing here. So when we created this model, we created a service. So we can say that even this you can deploy as a microservice. It's contain everything related to its domain. You can deploy that, right? It's the same thing here. So based on my BPM2 diagram, hello world, it created to me these endpoints, and now I can access them as a microservice. So it created here a post method that I can send, right? So I can just execute it, and let's see if I have.
So when you execute it, it just means that you're starting the process, right? You're triggering the start
Yes,
process.
yes. So when
Okay.
I started when I send my post request to that endpoint, automatically the process is initiated. And see here we have the hello world, right? And you can see that it's really what's happening there, because if I change let's change here the script task. Let's say that instead of hello, let's put more things here. Let's save it. And if you to try,
Like without restarting the server.
yeah, I didn't did anything. I just changed the process and I save it, right? It's really save it. Yes, it is. Just to make sure, right?
Yeah.
Let's execute. And let's check. See,
It
hello.
worked.
It worked. Yay!
Oh my
So
God.
that live reloading thing is due to
Yeah.
what
So
technology?
the hot reloading is a feature from Quarkus, actually. So we are using Quarkus as a platform here to build our business process, right? So we have the extension added, the Kogito. It's the real process engine running behind here, right? And based on Quarkus, you have the benefits of hot reload besides other things, like compiling native, you can do it using GraalVM if you want as well, any other good stuff. But the main thing here is see that the representation that we had from the business, exactly the same thing, you can use it for process execution and even to create services, right? And you call this example for any representation here, we can call some external services and do some orchestration based on that. So, and the most important thing is it maps really one-to-one to the business requirement. And this is the main benefit of those kind of platforms, business automation platforms. And I think that's it, Karina and Alex. So I also have here, I don't know if you had time, but even though people can execute also checking out our Kogito repository, the travel agents project that we have there, and so it's very interesting one for you to see how services can communicate with each others, how you can execute by orchestration or choreography or anything that you want to do in a development way of architecturing things, but in a domain-driven way. That's all.
This is excellent. So I'm removing your screen if you want to get back to the other tab in Chrome. So, wow, Laza, live BPM encoding.
Oh my God! So I was here just watching. I said, no, he will not do that. No, he will not do that. He's crazy, and he did awesome.
So I like how you could link both words, like the business word with the technology word. But we still have a couple of questions on that. Are you okay if we just bring some questions about it?
I'm just laughing here from Duncan mentioned about the BPM for people. Yeah, I recall that as well. Yeah. Thanks God it does not succeed.
So Alex, you mentioned something to me on the backstage about events, like streaming technologies.
Yeah, I think one question I have for Alessandro, the events we already asked him, the question that I have for him, in this dynamic world that we live, how is mapping to a rigid process? Like we are tidying to process a definition that a word that is changing all the time. How we can use and leverage these technologies, but it be more flexible. How you think about that?
Flexible in the sense of that we are done for anything that the software industry have not created yet, you mean?
No, I mean in terms of business process, right? Because you mentioned the digital transformation, and one aspect is to adapt yourself or quickly adapt.
Okay.
What is the effort to map this need to change to business process? Because it at first it looks like very rigid. How
it seems it could be very rigid, but actually it's just because the business is like that. Business process really express your business. If you have a flexible that requires actually like a flexible way to access the activities because it's not linear. So sometimes the knowledge is not based on the flow of the tasks, but about the knowledge worker. Right. In that sense, we have case management capabilities now also expressed by what we call flexible process. That means that you don't have necessarily linked by sequence flow a task to the other. Depending on where you are, you may have you may have some flexibility to define which will be the next step. This is also aligned with the first with specs. So you have case management capabilities available. Even inside the Kogito, we have it in format of extension for current business process. So you can define business process in some way that it does not really tied to a next execution. So dynamically, you can define which should be the next steps. I think that this is aligned with such thing from business, which requires for you actually to have a more flexible way to handle that. But see, this is just a requirement if the business reflects that. The beautiful thing about BPM, it really reflects what you have. Sorry, I have one thing here that I would like to comment. It's from Ravi. He mentioned about BPMN always involves cross-domain. How does it fit in domain-driven? Well, I not say that it's not 100% true, Ravi. I mean, business process is about actually, you may have different participants of a business process. Not necessarily they are from different domains. It's different when you just talking about microservices, because if you think in BPM that every activity is a microservice, so yes, you're right, but you are also wrong because you should not model like that, right? BPM is not about each step is a microservice. You may have a microservice where it is actually a couple of activities in a process that will be expressed as just one microservice because it is all about the same domain. Recall my slides about travel agents is exactly about that. So you have the travels as a domain, so it has everything related to travels on it. And once it needs to go to a visa application, which is a different domain, it's a different process, you will communicate by events. So it's totally event driven. And so you have two microservices, one microservice about visa, another microservice about travels, and they communicate with each other by events. So, and each one is scoped in its all context boundaries. Is that clear?
Very clear to me.
I think this is pretty exciting. And I was actually talking to the BPM community. I am part of a group of just like business users, business analysts, that business COE, as you mentioned, as you expressed in your slides. And I was trying to understand their perspective on how technology aligns with business processes. And really, what I feel like is that we, as tech people, we are being able to align the technology evolution along with the business process necessities, so we can properly fit like cloud technologies, event streaming, everything into the business needs, because they still need to map their processes and they still need to represent it. And if we can get that from their heads into like things that we can execute, I think that's the best of the two worlds, right?
Exactly. And the business will never die, right? We will always have business in the world. And that said, business process will never die, because we always will have a process over the business. And as I don't know any better metaphor to express the business by BPMN. I think that this is still very needed in the industry at all, and helping in inside the developers and other side analysts to try to bring together the same ideas for a resolution of problem using the technologies.
Yeah, and adding to that, one takeaway from your beautiful explanation about business process and all this is this sense that we are talking about old stuff is just wrong. We are solving business process, and as you mentioned, there's a process. No matter what, we may evolve technology, we may have different architectures in place, but the needs of the business to provide a workflow anyway, it's in there. Being on BPMN, the notation, being on serverless, using YAML files, doesn't matter. It's just that the business is still the same.
Yes, that's right, Percelli. So the business is still there, as I said, the process is still there. The way that we will be coding, of course, that as I said, there is a change in the industry about BPM suites to be more aligned with the needs of the marketing. So we have now analytics capabilities, collect information from the services being executed. All of these interconnected with cloud capabilities provided by Kubernetes and dashboards by Prometheus, Grafana, and all of these we can now build together to bring the benefits to the business users in the end. In the end, every software is based on business requirements. And I think that is my main message from this talk. Is more about you are still collecting what is needed from the build, from the business, and you are still able to run it, align with that speech using the same language, for this new world, also based on microservices or wherever it will become.
Excellent. And we have a question here that is going to become more and more popular from now on, because we have two projects. We, as the key group, we have like jBPM and we have Kogito. And you are speaking about lots of core concepts of the business practice, of the business process management practice. And are these BPM concepts also supported in like jBPM? Because we are talking a lot about Kogito in here.
Totally. Well, the concepts about BPM, it's a general concept actually, right? Even the notation and also the model for execution. The main difference between Kogito and jBPM are just the way that they offer the capabilities to deploy a process, right? So, but behind the scenes, like if you have a sub-process, you may have this sub-process as a different service, even in jBPM. If you need to receive a message fire an event and have a choreography and an event-driven based process using jBPM and or Red Hat Process Automation Manager, you can do exactly the same, right? So it does not matter the technology. The general idea are all the same.
Excellent. Thank you. Laza, thank you for accepting the invite to be here today. It was pretty clarifying to understand the background on where we started and where we are today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for me for inviting me for this.
Yeah,
Very proud to be here.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. And I think you put the bar really high in today live. So the next getting started sessions that we have, we're going to be very challenging for our next speakers. And Karina, may you talk now about what we are planning for next week?
Exactly. So, Laza, thank you. Let me guide you to the backstage gently. See you later, Laza. Thank you. And thank you for being here today. This was the first episode of our Getting Started series. So today we learned a little bit more about the background of business processes, business process management, and how technology is currently supporting this. And we still have a lot to learn. So we can still learn about the background of rules. We can learn about rules engine, why is it important, and how we can mix both words like rules, processes. How does this mix? How does this fit and merge into each other's world? And also, how do we implement this in technology? So for the next session, next Tuesday, next Tuesday, exactly, we will actually talk about the implementation of business rules using also a specification that is pretty well established today, the DMN specification, right, Alex?
Yes, we'll have an introduction to this topic, the decision model notation. That would be we'll starting towards the rule side of the business automation.
Exactly. So if you enjoyed today's session, make sure you drop your like, subscribe to the channel so you can receive notification for the upcoming sessions. Thank you, Alex, for being here with me today. See you next Tuesday.
See you. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.